I'm like, hallelujah, Lord, look at me. I'm alive again. I'm like, all I had to do was change what I was eating.
Scott, how did you find Carnivore?
Well, Dave, it started about 2.5 years ago in the end of 2022. I started having some health issues and I noticed that I was gaining weight. I was around 250, and within a month, I'd gained 10 pounds, which was abnormal. And then within another month, I'd gained 20 pounds, which was abnormal. I hadn't changed. I wasn't on a diet or anything. I was on the standard American diet. So I started getting uncomfortable. My stomach was swelling up. I couldn't figure out what was going on. So I go to the ER, and they blew me off as having high blood pressure and didn't really do anything. They didn't pursue anything. So I come back home, still having the same problems. Now I can't eat. I'm getting worse. So I go to another hospital. They admit me and they said, okay, we need to do a biopsy of your kidney. I'm like, okay, let's do it. So in February of 2023, they did a biopsy and they diagnosed me with FSGS, nephrotic syndrome, and hyperlipidemia. So FSGS stands for focal segmental, let me see if I pronounce this right, glomerulosclerosis of the kidneys, which in layman's terms, that means that my kidneys aren't filtering the way they're supposed to. If you take like a spaghetti colander with all the holes in it and you're draining water out of it, if you look at that as my kidney, just everything just dumped out of my kidneys instead of being filtered, right? And so I looked at the slides. I really didn't know what I was looking at when I was looking at that stuff. And I'm like, man, what a diagnosis. There's no cure. It hit me hard, Dave. I had to come to grips with what I was going to do. They hit me with steroids right off the bat, 60 milligrams a day. Well, you know what that does to your body. It just sends you into a mess. And so I did that for a little while and nothing changed. And I finally got to another doctor and we started looking at things. And that didn't really go that well either. They let me blow up. So 307 pounds from 250 before at the next visit to the ER. I said, look, you got to do something. I'm miserable. I can't eat. I can't sleep. I'm getting where I can't breathe, nothing. So they admitted me and started IV albumin, which is a protein your liver makes. And then Bumax, they drip that in for 12 hours. So over the next 7 days, I passed about 50 pounds of fluid in that 7 days. I went home, stayed home about 4 days. That wasn't enough. I had to go back. So I go back. They did the same routine again. In total, I lost 77 pounds of fluid, Dave. 77 pounds of fluid. That's a lot. So I was now 230. I'm like, wow, I couldn't see any anasarca edema in my legs anymore. Because I didn't have just edema. I had anasarca, which was all over. But it never went into my lungs, the fluid buildup, which was a good thing, obviously. And so I was miserable and didn't know what to do. Well, they wanted to stop the protein loss in my urine. They said that's what's continuing to cause the damage in my kidneys. And I had massive amounts of protein loss, coming out in my urine. And you could see I couldn't physically see blood, but the microscope and all that could see a little bit of blood in there. And they said, we got to suppress your immune system. We got to suppress your immune system. Your body is attacking yourself. And I'm like, okay, what are we going to suppress it with? Well, we tried the steroids. That didn't work. Well, we need to try this other drug, cyclosporin. I'm like, really? What's the side effects? Oh, well, it causes cancer. I'm like, well, why do I want to do something that's going to cause cancer? And then I still wind up on dialysis. So I decided not to take it because, I'm like, if I'm going to be on dialysis, I'm just going to be on dialysis. I don't want to have other complications along with that. And that's a tough decision to make, but that's the choice I made. So for 2 years, I rocked on, and my kidney function up to December of last year was at 20%. That's where I was surviving at, which is barely even living. And I was miserable, and I sat in this chair every day, you know, doing what I could do, trying to figure out what to do. So thanks to a good friend, Mark Henderson, I've known him for 49 years. He kept telling me, hey, you need to watch this Dr. Boz, Barry, Baker, and you. Said, you need to watch this. And he sent me a link to a lady that had done carnivore who had some kidney issues, was going into kidney failure. And she did it and it turned her around. Well, initially when I watched that, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of hard to believe, because it's just hard for people to grasp that you can change what you're eating and help heal your body. They think we have to take pills for everything, right? So I finally said, look, he kept saying, what do you have to lose? I said, nothing. I don't have it. At this point, I'm dying. I don't have anything to lose. So January of this year, I started keto again. And initially, and my wife was going to do it with me also. And she was having some liver issues. And so we started slowly because I knew there was going to be the keto flu, and we were still eating nuts and fruit in the beginning. And so we were still getting too many carbs because of that. So a month went by. I noticed I felt better. I'm like, okay, it's time to eliminate the nuts and the fruit. So we eliminated that. We had a little bit of 3 or 4 days of the keto flu once our body changed over, and then we were fine after that. And then I noticed it wasn't long after that I noticed my grip was a lot stronger than it was. And I told my wife, I'm like, hey, something's changing. I'm getting better. So I went and had blood work done, every month from the first of the year. So in December, my GFR was 20. And February 14th, it was 30. A month later, it was 37. A month after that, it was 45. I'm like, hallelujah, Lord, look at me. I'm alive again. I'm like, all I had to do was change what I was eating. It blew me away, Dave. And the last blood work I did, which was another 30 days, it didn't show any more improvement. I'm still at 45%. My hemoglobin, everything, the creatine, the bun, even the protein loss in my urine. I had an appointment yesterday with my nephrologist. The first time I saw him in February, right? But I didn't tell him what I was doing. So yesterday we had that conversation because he saw the weight loss. As of today, I've lost 41 pounds since January doing this. And so he sees the weight loss. He says, tell me what you're doing. Which drug did you use? Ozempic? I said, no, I use the Scott Wilson drug. Well, what's that? I said, I control what I put in my mouth. And he's like, okay. So once we started the conversation, then he was on board with it. He's like, I don't watch YouTube, but I'll watch your interview. And the whole point of this is to share this information with other kidney patients, so maybe they don't have to go through what I've had to go through, and maybe they can live a better life. And so he pretty much released me yesterday after telling me last year that I was going to be on dialysis by January or December of last year. I told my wife that when I didn't know where I was at or I couldn't breathe, then they would do something. That's a heck of a diagnosis to get. I'm like, you're just going to let me die until you do something. That was what they were going to do. And I'm like, okay, well, so into the keto for a couple of months or whatever. And my friend is telling me, hey, you need to do carnivore. You need to watch Dave. You need to do carnivore. Right. So I watched and I'm like, yeah, let's do it. So initially I was going to do it for 3 days. And I have a keto mojo meter where I'm checking my glucose and my ketones. And so I was keeping up with it. I never had an issue with glucose, so that was never an issue as far as being diabetic. And so at the end of 3 days, my ketones hadn't really gone up. I was still at like 0.8. I hadn't seen a spike, so I'm like, I got to go longer. So I went another 2 days and then boom, now my ketones are at like 1.5. I'm like, hey, this is working pretty good. I'm feeling better. So I just extended it even further. So then I went 7 days. And then I went 9 days, no carbs, strict carnivore. Well, in those 9 days roughly, I lost 9 pounds, which was probably mostly fluid because I'm carrying a lot of fluid, from the kidney problems, right? And I'm like, man, what a difference. 9 pounds in like 9 days. And so there's no reason to go back. I feel good. You know, I don't need those carbs, right? And initially I was eating, asparagus and cabbage and broccoli and all that stuff. And it wasn't bothering me because that's what one of the docs, Barry, had said we needed to do to help our kidneys, right? But once I started seeing that improvement, in those ketones and my kidney function and all that, I just stayed with a carnivore. And my wife is pretty much doing the same thing now, and her liver enzymes have turned around. Her boom, within 2 months, it went back to normal. You know, and she had fatty liver from it. So, and she eats a little bit of veggies. She's like she'll do the carnivore a little bit, but she's more well. I got to have some veggies here and there. But it's to me, Dave. It's nothing short of a miracle. You know, there's I don't know and don't really want to go into religion, but there's a God above, and he's the one that's controlling all of this. And we just have to be smart enough to figure out how to use what he gave us to help heal us, and that's through food and not these pills and all this other stuff that they want to give us, and sending you an email while I was visiting the East Coast. The friend that I mentioned, I was at his house and he said, "Hey, you need to send Dave an email and see if you can get an interview." And that's when I sent the email and we set this up. So, thanks to him and you and everybody else videos that I've watched that led me in this direction. And I'll never go back. What my family practitioner, when I was talking to her about it, she said, "Well, you can't do this for the rest of your life." I'm like, "Why not?"
Watch me.
You know, what do you mean you can't do this for the rest of your life? I said, "So you want me to go back to what I was doing and die instead of doing this and try to live?" No, I don't think so. But I don't
When
understand. But go ahead.
when you hear that kind of thing from a doctor, it's like really strange because they're not even like it feels like they're not even thinking through what they're saying. It's just an automatic response.
Yes, and it's not really one. It's not the right one. But that's what they're trained to do, I guess. And I didn't know how my doctor, nephrologist, was going to take what I was telling him yesterday, but he took it pretty well. And the whole point was for him to share this information with his other patients. And because he has contact with all these people, right? And I mean, that's what I'm trying to ask him. I mean, you are here to help people, right? So if you have this information, and you don't share it, you know, why? But he's like, well, there's political reasons why we can't have a so like a class at this. It's not a hospital, but at a clinic. Where you would say have kidney patients come in and somebody would come up and speak or whatever. So that's not going to happen. Because I mean, I feel like I have to have a voice somewhere, Dave, and this is the first one. So I don't know where else to go, to
Mm.
get it out, to get this message out about
Mm.
how this is changing our life. I mean, I was sitting on death row. I just got a pardon.
Yeah. And the best of it is that before when your kidney functions at 20%, you're just sitting there waiting, feeling helpless, but now you feel like you're in control now.
Yeah, the description I gave my doctor yesterday is I was buried in the ground and the only thing sticking out was my finger from the dirt. And somebody finally saw it and dug me up. He's like, "Oh, that's a pretty good analogy." I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, that's the way I feel.
Right.
I could
So
tell, and even my eyesight, Dave, improved. I mean, I have glasses, reader glasses on now because it's kind of blurry up close, right? But I could tell off in a distance that my eyesight even improved. Even some of the marks, and stuff that like bumps and stuff I had on top of my head and this and that in different places. Most of those are gone now. I'm like, all I had to do was crank up the ketones in my body, you know, and these things are running around doing their thing, and the highest level I've seen was like 2.1 was the highest that I've got to on the ketones. But, it's just, it's amazing that I feel so much better. And
Yeah.
I don't want to live life on dialysis, Dave.
I had a customer once, and, like, that was her day, basically coming to an English class and then spending the rest of her time visiting the clinic getting dialysis, and it was just she was always so, like, tired looking, she's like, "Oh, I've gotta go back there after this," It's nowhere
Yeah,
to
I mean,
live.
yeah, having to look at the different options you have on dialysis, through the stomach or through the arm or here or there. And, you know, I don't like hospitals and I really don't like doctors that much. And what kind of led to this, Dave, I really didn't go into that, was I've had 3 back surgeries over the last 22 years. The first one was in '04, and it was bad. That was even worse. That made me worse than I was before. And what happened to my spine was the disc between the vertebrae dried up and collapsed at the bottom. I was a machinist. That's what I did for a living. And it wasn't because of the work I was doing. They said it was something I was born with. That cushion between the vertebrae just disappeared, and it was rubbing bone on bone, and it finally moved enough to where it hit that nerve. And the first surgery I had in '04 was a failure. And so for 13 and a half years, they filled me full of pills and told me it was all in my head. When I knew good and well, Dave, it wasn't in my head, and I almost died in 2012 from that. I got aspirated, got pneumonia in my lungs, and all. It was a fiasco, So, I mean, I've been in and out of the opiates and getting off of that and all that stuff. And Advil, maybe I shouldn't say that name. All right, maybe you want to strike Advil, right? But NSAIDs, or and anti-inflammatories, is what's messed up my kidneys. That's another important thing that people need to understand about this over-the-counter medication. They were giving me anti-inflammatories, as soon as all this started. That was the first thing they hit me with, along with the pain medication. So I've been taking that for over 20 years. And then when I got off of the opiates, I was just using NSAIDs, over the counter. Nobody ever said, you know, that taking this long term was going to be bad for my kidneys. I read the bottle, and it says don't take more than whatever dose, da 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 da. But when you're in pain, that much pain all the time, you need something, right? And so that's what messed up my kidneys, was taking NSAIDs for so long, because they did every test known to man, to look at what caused my FSGS, and they can't find anything, but I have that history. So that's what they link it to, So people that watch this, you need to be careful, using NSAIDs, and only for a short period of time. And after that, you need to figure out something else, and stay away from that. And
Right. It's pretty
I'm
scary.
yeah, I'm fortunate to even be here and not be hooked up to a machine, you know. And it's still amazing to me because I was worried about the protein loss also through my urine, because I've got test strips at home. I can test my urine and I can see +1, +3, on the protein loss and stuff. And I've been checking it, and I was looking for that, right? So finally, it showed an improvement about a month ago, where it went from +3 to +1. So yesterday, I had to do a urine sample a week ago. So I asked the doc. I said, "Hey, look at my urine results and tell me what you see in there." And it was a ratio, some kind of protein ratio. The way they figured it, I don't know exactly what it was, but he said, "Remember, I told you if we got this under 1,000, your kidneys would be happy." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Look at the number," and it was 1,065. So I'm right there where he said I needed to be for my kidneys to be happy, and all through carnivore. All through carnivore. The only thing he busted me on, Dave, was my vitamin D. He said, "Well, your vitamin D's low." He said, "Your diet's not helping that, is it?" I said, "That's been low for how long now? 2 years, ever since all this started." Then he wants to shove some vitamins, heavy duty stuff, anything he can prescribe. I said, well,
Right.
look, all I need to do is eat more eggs, to get the, because if my body's not absorbing it, I can eat, however much vitamin D you give me, and it's not going to do any good. Right. So hopefully that will change because we haven't seen that really change, looking at all my numbers, everything else is improving, and even my white blood cell count, Dave, this is what I told the doc yesterday. I said, you and several other doctors told me that my body was attacking itself. I said, if you look at my white blood cell count, when you were giving me the steroids, it was over 22,000, which was caused by the steroids. But leading up to that, it was running around 12.5, which is high. That's out of range. And nobody could figure out why. They sent me to a cancer doctor 5 years ago, and they didn't know what it was. If you look at my WBC now, the last blood work, it was 8.5. The one before, it was at 10, and the one before that, it was at 11. So in that short period of time, you can see that my body's not attacking itself anymore, right? Because I don't have that high white blood cell count anymore, right? And so, I mean, I confronted this man, that has a degree. I'm just a layperson, and said, hey, this is what you told me, and this is what I'm doing. And now look at what's happening. My body's not attacking itself anymore, So I didn't
Mm.
need to suppress my immune system. I just needed to change what I was eating. And you
Right.
stop and think about how many millions of people. And I looked at FSGS. There's only an average of maybe 40,000 people in the US that get diagnosed with that. So it's rare that people get this, whether it's hereditary or brought on by other symptoms or not. But there's got to be a way to get this information out and help other people around the world, not
Yeah.
just here,
Yeah.
but everybody. So
Mm.
if I can come on here and make a difference to one person, it's worth it.
Yeah.
It's well
Um,
worth it.
well, congratulations. It's like that's a massive turnaround in less than 6 months. It's, you know, it always just strikes me as it's so crazy. We spend so much time with doctors and doctors telling us there's no hope and prescribing drugs and all that kind of thing. And then the turnaround happens just by giving your body the nutrition it needs. That's it. Um, but how have you been eating day to day? What's your menu like?
Yeah, so I eat like 3 or 4 eggs in the morning, along with I eat uncured. So I found uncured sausage, so it doesn't have any of the nitrates and the bad stuff and no sugar or none of that stuff in it. And uncured bacon with none of the same thing, none of that stuff in it. And then I'll doctor up the sausage a little bit, put some cayenne pepper in it and some red pepper flakes to give it a little bit of seasoning, and then I'll just either scramble eggs in bacon grease or either in butter, you know, and that's what I'll eat for breakfast. And then I only eat twice a day, and so usually breakfast is 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, and then around two, 1 or 2 is time to eat. And so all I've been eating now is steak for the most part, is ribeyes, and my wife said, well, you know how expensive that is? And I'm like, well, you know how much it costs every time we go out to eat? It's $75, $100 to go out to eat. I can buy a ribeye for 15 or 20 bucks. So we're still saving money, eating
Yeah,
this way.
and look at the medical costs for dialysis, etc.
Yeah. Not to mention, I mean, where am I going to be able to go? I've been on disability since 2004. I've been disabled since then. And so it's not like I can really go anywhere and do anything. I mean, I can't really. It's difficult, Dave. Just put it that way. Every day to day, functioning. So hopefully, this is going to help some of that back pain also. You know, as I get more weight off, because now I weighed 241, and obviously I don't have a goal. My goal is to get wherever carnivore takes me. It's just to continue eating this way and see where I wind up. I want to get rid of that obese on my medical chart. I am tired of seeing that, Dave. I'm tired of being labeled as obese. If I get the two. 214, I think I'll be overweight, right? I won't be obese, but man, I want that gone bad. And I just, everything has changed. My whole life has changed. Thanks to you and people like you.
So, in terms of like just your day to day, what has changed for you as far as alertness or mental clarity or your sleep? Have those things improved?
Oh yeah, definitely the mental clarity, has improved a lot. And I don't feel like I'm in a fog, my sleep's been messed up for a long time, because of the back and all that stuff or whatever. So I haven't really noticed any improvements in the sleep that much. I'm doing good if I get 3 or 4 hours of sleep, because usually I'm up all night going to the bathroom. You know, hey, that's part of, and that's one of the good things, about seeing that doctor yesterday. I'm like, hey, look at my medication list. Take this off, take this off, take this off. And that's another thing, Dave, I didn't tell you. I've been able to stop one of the blood pressure medicines. I've been able to stop all the diuretics. I've been able to stop everything except for one blood pressure medication because of this, and now I just cut one of them in half because my blood pressure is like 120 over 75, you know, which is okay. So I think I'll eventually, if I lose, another 40 pounds, that one will be gone also, so I won't be on any medications anymore. That's my goal. And so day to day life, has gotten so much better. I mean, I have some hobbies, but I wasn't able to do them. And you see my email address there says RC Trucks, so that's kind of one of my hobbies is RC cars. It gives me something to do, to use my brain. I was a machinist. That's what I did my whole life, right? So I need things mechanical to figure out. I troubleshooted a lot in the job that I had, and I miss that. You know, so I always enjoyed somebody bringing something to me and saying, "Hey, here's the parts. It's all broke. Whatever, fix it. Yeah, go away. Leave me alone for 8 hours, and I'll give you brand new stuff." That's what I did. That was what gave me satisfaction. Tell me I can't do something. Tell me I can't do it, and then just watch and see. You know, that's what I thrive on. And so now, I have more energy. I've been able to travel a little bit locally. Where before I really couldn't, and I'm getting back into my RCs a little bit. And I'm no pro. I don't race or any of that stuff. I'm just what you would consider a weekend warrior or a basher. You know, it's just a hobby. That's all it is. People have different hobbies. And that's just one of mine that I've taken up after I became disabled. To keep doing something. And then the rest of a typical day for me is taking care of where I live. I mean, we still have a house, that we got to take care of. I can't do any yard work. I don't do that. I have to, get somebody else to do that. But I mean, I have to clean up and, take care of myself. And I'm like, that can be a challenge when your kidney function is 20%. I don't, how many people have been with their kidney function that low, but it's not a good thing. It's not a good feeling. I've been in and out of the hospital, and one of the times I went down there, I was having so much pain, like right here. Oh yeah, does this show up, Dave? Yeah. I go down, and I was having massive cramps in my side right here, and it kind of felt it was burning and all this stuff, and I didn't know what was causing it, so I let it go for a week, and I'm rolling around and can't sleep, hurt. And I go down to the ER, and my kidney function was 20%. And I told him all this stuff. The doctor was a yo yo, you know. He's like, oh, you're seeking drugs, this, that, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so I leave. Well, I guess maybe a month ago, I'm looking through some YouTube videos, and I find a guy that has posted up a video where he was going into kidney failure. And he went through this whole story of, when it started, and he didn't do anything about it. And he was going through as his GFR dropped. And he said when his GFR got to 30, he described exactly the same thing that was happening to me. And I'm like, wow, this doctor that I went to blew me off as an idiot. But this guy just said he was having the same symptoms I was. Now, he eventually wound up in kidney failure and is on dialysis, and I feel bad for somebody like that because he probably didn't have this information that we have now, but the doctors, they just, if they can't prescribe you something or give you a pill to fix it, they don't want to see you.
Yeah, it's but I'm a little bit shocked that the doctor actually said to you, "You're just seeking drugs."
Yep.
That
I'm sitting there dying, Dave, because that's basically what was happening. And that's what the man said. He could have checked me right then, did a blood test. There was no drugs in my system, but for him to say that, and I think some of it comes from the area that I live in out here, because there's been a lot of, abuse of opiates and stuff, and there was a fire that came through here in 2018. I don't know if you were familiar with that or not. The campfire that came through California and killed 85 people. And I live right there in that area is where I'm living. And so there were a lot of people that come out of the woodwork, that were, I guess, receiving opiates from doctors around here, whatever. So, and then I started researching a little bit, and it said there was like 7 times the national average of opiate prescriptions in this county. So that might have been kind of why he threw me in that category. But this man is supposed to be a professional with a degree, right? He should be able to discern between somebody who's really actually in trouble versus somebody in there trying to seek drugs, instead of just throwing us all into the same category. So
Yeah.
me and him didn't get along too well that day.
Yeah, I can imagine. Um, so, uh, regarding your back, it have you had any kind of relief at all? Like, do you feel like the inflammation's going down at all?
you know, I really, I really can't say that I've had any noticeable relief from the back problems yet. But one thing that did happen I didn't tell you about was after I had to stop taking the Advil, and then 3 months later, I noticed I started having pain in the right shoulder. So I go to the orthopedic, let's snap a photo, see what's up, right? Oh, he's like, oh, yeah, there's the money shot right there. You have bone on bone arthritis in your right shoulder. I'm like, okay, that's great. So what are we going to do about that? Well, you don't need a replacement right now. I said, well, that's good because I'm not going to have that anyway. And so I just dealt with it. I just lived with it. But let me tell you what carnivore and keto done for that. Within probably 2.5 months, maybe after I started this in January, I got up one morning and I couldn't even hardly lift this arm, Dave. I had to take this hand right here and pick it up and put it over my head. I couldn't do this. There was no way I could do that, right? I got up that morning and I'm like, I feel better. Something's up. So my wife gets up, and we get in the truck and go down the road. And I'm like, watch this. I'm all over the place. She's like, what are you doing? I said, look at my shoulder. Look at it. I said, it's another miracle. I'm like, golly, how many more things are going to happen? That's good from keto and carnivore. She said, you got to stop. You're acting crazy. They're going to pull us over because you're in diet. I said, I don't care. I don't pull me over. I don't care. I don't care. So there is an example, even though it hasn't hit my spine yet, so to speak, and it might not, we don't know. There's an example of inflammation being gone and being able to move my shoulder.
That's
That it
awesome.
still hurts. It still hurts, Dave. I mean, that's probably never going to go away. I'm still going to have pain there, right? But now I can use it. Before I had to just limp around. So now I can deal with it. I'm like, golly, thank you, thank you. Hallelujah. How much more is going to happen? And I can't wait to see what the future has. I can't wait to see. So, how much more improvement. And it may be that I wind up at 45% kidney function, and that's where I stay. We don't know. We don't know how far this is going to go, but looking at all that blood work and looking at the urine and the hyperlipidemia, I don't know if you've heard of, obviously, you know what total cholesterol, you know what all that stuff is, right? So, you know what my total cholesterol was when this first happened? It was over 1,000. My triglycerides were at like 490. Unheard of.
Wow.
Yeah, I unheard of. They wanted to cram statins down my throat immediately. I said, I can't take that stuff. You know what that does? I said, so you're going to save my heart, but kill my brain. I said, I'd rather know where I'm at and have a heart attack. That's exactly what I told him. I said, I don't want that stuff. And so I took fish oil and stuff to try to help that, which I've eaten a lot of fish in my life too. And the last lipid panel I did, it was at 500 total. The good cholesterol is
So
normal range.
that's half.
It's half. It's half of what it was. Yes, like that. Which it just the list keeps going on and on of all the stuff that's changing, and to drop the cholesterol that much. And I'm to the point where, why do they show commercials on TV about statins and they follow it with a commercial for CoQ10? Oh, we're going to give you this drug right here, but you need to take this supplement because we're taking out the other cholesterol that you need for your brain.
Right. It's a really cool business model, right? If you're running the company, it's,
Yeah,
if you're one of the customers, maybe not so much, but, um,
yeah,
so, just on the cholesterol drop, like, your triglycerides dropped as well?
yes, oh yes. It was. I'd have to look back at my blood work, but yeah, I think it's like cut in half. Also, it's probably down below 200 now. Also,
So,
you know,
it really feels like when you're eating properly, your body suddenly goes, "Okay, well, I can normalize everything now."
yeah. Like I said, the only thing he could bust me on was my vitamin D.
Right,
It was,
right.
and it has been forever. And I'm like, hey, that's the only thing he looked at that and grinned. But everything else on there, he's like, that's normal. That's normal. That's close. I'm like, yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? And all because I control what goes in this mouth right here. And
That's
I don't. And
awesome.
one thing about carnivore too, I've noticed is you don't have the same hunger feeling that you have when you're on the sad diet. Where you spike up and down, 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 up and down. I don't have that anymore. You know, if I get hungry, yeah, I'll get hungry, but I can get past it. If I don't want to eat right then, I can go on, I can fast, and I can get past that. Where before it feels, if you're doing the sad diet, it feels like you're going to crash and fall out on the floor if you don't throw some carbs in your body real quick. Well, this eliminates all that. So why wouldn't people want to jump on board? But there again, politics play a role in all of this stuff and in the medical field and blah, 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 just like you were talking about the business model, right? But I mean,
Yeah,
and even some of the nurses, that nurse that told me about the statin, she said, well, if you were my dad, I would suggest you take them. I said, well, you're not my daughter, so I don't have to take your suggestions. And I said, why do you want to, like I said before, why do you want to save my heart and kill my brain? I mean, come on, people, wake up. And if you Google what's the number one prescribed drug, it's statins. And I'm not saying that there's not a use for them. I understand that if people have had open heart surgery and they've had all those issues and clogged arteries and all that stuff, and they have surgery and have bypasses, then they probably need to be taking something to keep it from building up. But when you get our age, if your cholesterol goes up a little bit, you got to weigh the good with the bad, right? If you're going to have a heart attack, you're going to have it anyway, whether you take a statin or not. I mean,
yeah.
that's just me using my common sense and talking to other people. And my friend that I mentioned before, and he's an RN, he has been his whole life. And not that he's some expert, but he himself has been doing carnivore for 2 years, and he was having some liver issues and straightened all that up. He lost 60 pounds. and he's working out, and he's not the same person, and I
That's
thank
right.
him for directing me and guiding me through this, you know.
Mm.
But
So, if someone came to you and said, "Look, Scott, I need to do this. So, I've got kidney problems, or I just want to lose some weight, whatever it is." What advice would you give them for getting started to kind of stick with it?
I would do what we did at the beginning of the year, which is to cut everything out that's processed, but include nuts, some nuts, cashews, whatever, and include some fruit in there. And you're not necessarily, because if you eat too much fruit, you're not going to be in ketosis. There's too many carbs in there. But to soften that blow from the keto flu, as they call it, you know, my suggestion would be to start there. Cut everything out that's processed, right? And incorporate those nuts and that fruit. And then once you get comfortable with that for a month or so, then you drop the fruit and you drop the nuts. And then you keep your carbs under 20 carbs a day. And I think that would make the transit, because people that go into it, full blast right off the bat, when they get hit with the keto flu or whatever, they're going to like, man, this is killing me. I can't keep doing this. But if they ease into it a little bit, I think it would help people stay on track and continue to do it. If they did it a little bit easier. And to me, you need to get a keto mojo meter also of some sorts, so you can check your ketones and know whether you're in ketosis or not, and keep up with that stuff and monitor it. I mean, yeah, you can become obsessed with it, or whatever. But I mean, to me, to see the improvements that I've had in such a short period of time, I'm checking pretty frequently, or what I was, right? I've kind of slowed down a little bit now, with the checking of the ketones and stuff, but I'm like, dang, so that would be my suggestion. And then once you get into the keto and you've gone and you're in ketosis, right? Then my other suggestion would be to swap to carnivore. Obviously, use that to get into it and then go to carnivore. And, I thought about trying that 72-hour sardine thing, that I've seen one of these other people, Dr. Boz, promoting, right? So I go to the store and I buy, I don't know, 8 or 10 cans of sardines, I open one of them up. I remember eating those as a kid, and we go to the hunting club or whatever, we'd have crackers and cheese and sardines. Well, the quality of the sardines must have went down the tank compared to 50 years ago, right? Because the first ones I opened up and I looked at that and I'm like, really? I got to eat this for 3 days? And I took a bite, I put some hot sauce on it, I'm like, there's not, I can't really do that for 3 days. But, the carnivore side of it I can do, but, so I haven't really tried the sardine thing, but we want to change, and incorporate more fasting. That's the other thing I think that speeds up your ketone production and probably your weight loss too. And then that's to fast at least 12 hours every day, you know. So I make sure that if I eat at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, well, if it, at 5 or 6, if I get like a hunger feeling or something, I might have a pork skin, but usually I don't eat anything, right? I'll just go to the next day. So we're thinking about now trying like one meal a day for like 3 days. And then we go back to 2 meals a day like we were doing, just to boost up that weight loss and those ketones, and to see how our body responds to that. So I'm looking forward to, we have to come up with some kind of meal plan, because, I'm trying to explain to my wife, hey, we can't just eat a little bit and then go 23 hours without eating. You got to eat more than what you think you can handle in that one meal, to help get through until you eat again the next time. Right. So she's on board with it. We just haven't we haven't tried that yet. So I think that's the next thing we're going to do. Is there was autophagy, I think was a word that Dr. Boz was using. And I think she said that after 12 hours of fasting was really when it started kicking up, when you got into the 13th and the 14th hour of fasting, you know. So I'm looking forward to that, and just since the 23rd of last month, I've lost another 9 pounds, just since the 23rd of last month. And I've noticed that we'll lose and then you'll kind of stall a little bit, then you'll lose and then you just kind of like plateaus, and, so I was at a friend's house, whatever, didn't have any scales, so that on the 23rd, I stepped on their scales and I weighed like 249. And this morning I was 240.4. So just since then, continuing what I'm doing, it's just amazing, Dave, that this come off that fast, and how
Mm,
well, how
mm.
good I feel, how much energy I have, how much drive I have. I want to do things now. I want to live. I don't want to die now. I want to live. And this is giving me a new life. I can't
Mm.
thank you enough for what you do. You know,
Cheers. So, Scott, if people want to reach out to you, how can they get in contact? What's the best way of getting onto you?
I left an email address right there at the bottom. I guess they could see that. That would be the best way to get in touch with me. If anybody has any questions or they want to ask me what I'm doing, or if it opens another door, I'm willing to share any information I have or anything I've gone through with anybody in this community to help. That's what this is about. Is reaching as many people as possible. And I thank you, Dave, for opening up my email and sending me this invitation.
No, no worries. Well, I'll also include your email in the show notes. Scott, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I really appreciate your time.
Yes, sir. Hey, thanks for having me on here, Dave.